So it looks like on the left-hand side here, we're going to have Charles Schutt, also known as Twitch to some of you who are from the Florida community. We've got a, looks like
mono green, almost mono green.
Skin Shifter. I saw Skin Render, and I was very confused because I didn't see a way to cast that. So this is going to be one of the heavy green Kessig Wolfron decks. So Kessig green. Huntsmaster of the Fells, ubiquitous in the Kessig decks these days.
Definitely. Also Hell Rider, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely another card that's going to be surprising when Dan sees it. So we've got Dan Greeleaf on the right-hand side.
Yep, he's playing a black-blue zombie deck, a deck we've seen a lot of today.
Yep.
His is a little unusual. He has Sword of War in pieces. He has Liliana's main deck.
Yep. Looks very heavily black. Just a little bit of a splash for blue. No islands at all. Just the Dark Slick Shores and Drowned Catacombs to be able to cast his blue cards.
Yep, his 4 image and his 4 diagraph captain, only blue cards. Sideboard doesn't have any real blue cards either. He has Metamorph, but he doesn't need blue for that.
Yep.
And again, this deck just not playing enough land, only 22 land. It's almost also a common theme we've had this weekend too. But.
So Charles leads off with a Copperline Gorge into a Birds of Paradise. Dan leads off with a Swamp. And Tragic slips the Birds of Paradise.
Yeah. And as far as he knows, he's playing against Wolfrun, and that's almost a full-time walk, so definitely the right play.
Yep. A Rootbound Crag comes in tapped after Charles lays down another Birds of Paradise. Second Swamp from Dan. And a Fume Spitter. And another Fume Spitter. And it looks like not going to let him have any Birds of Paradise here.
No, dead birds. The only problem is he doesn't really have any pressure. Charles still at 20. But
apparently Charles is very adamant about having some sort of ramp here.
Wow.
Because as he plays another Birds of Paradise, that's number 3 for those of you who are counting, and a Llanowar Elves.
But only 2 lands. So if Dan has a removal spell to go with that. Oh, okay. So
interestingly, the Fume Spitter hits the.
Wow.
Never mind. Fume Spitter hits the Llanowar Elves, which is kind of irrelevant as the Tragic Slip follows up and takes out that other Birds. Digraph Ghoul
Strangleroot
drops
Geist
down, and a Forest throws a Strangleroot Geist across at Dan. So we see our first blood of the game actually goes to Charles.
It's interesting, on turn 3, the players have 1-for-1'd each other 4 times. Not something you see too often.
Especially in decks like this.
Yeah. So the Ghoul comes in, puts the life totals at 18 apiece.
And another Digraph Ghoul. This one's not the full art game day promo, though.
No, not a sexy
quite as
Ghoul.
Impressive.
Still does 2, though. So he'll take it. And there's a Hell Rider.
Hell Rider means that he gets to come in for 7 right there.
Wow. That's a pretty big turn after both players were at 20, 2 or 3 turns into the game. That's pretty huge.
So that seems like one of the cards that Charles has brought in that not everybody had on their radar.
No. Some people played it at the Pro Tour, and it was supposed to be one of the most powerful cards in Dark Ascension, but hasn't really found a home yet. Wow. Dan just scoops.
Well, that's 7 power worth of guys, and 3's going straight at the head.
Wow.
Dan must have felt he did not have enough gas to get back out of that.
Yeah, if I was Dan, I wouldn't have scooped. I would have just double blocked the Hell Rider, taken that out in combat. One of your ghouls live. So you drop pretty low, but you still have a lot of outs. But Dan felt he couldn't win. Maybe a little premature. But
so let's look at these sideboards. Dan obviously looking to come back in here. Does not look like his sideboard is heavily geared towards dealing with these here. He does have sort of Feast and Famine, which will give him some good protection against the green. But
yeah, other than that, not a heck of a lot. He could side in Black Sun Zenith if he wanted to.
Give him a little bit of white.
I think so. I think that's what I'd do. I would just try and play my threats a little slower, maybe not Tragic Slip the Birds. Maybe just save up for a Black Sun Zenith if you have it. Bloodline Keeper also might be good.
Bloodline Keeper's pretty strong, but Daniel's in pretty good shape with the 3 Fume Spitters and 4 Tragic Slips to keep Charles from blowing him out. But
Right.
he's got to find some pressure to go along with that. Let's look at Charles' sideboard. Charles also has this sort of Feast and Famine, which, from what he saw from Dan, he doesn't know that Dan has blue.
No, and even if he does, it's usually not Mana Leak. I don't think this deck usually plays that, so he can feel pretty safe bringing that in.
Yep, and that protection from black is going to be really important because even the blue creatures
are black.
They're black.
Yeah, I mean, Phantasmal Image, I guess, can copy one of your own green creatures, but usually it'll copy a black creature. So he also has Ancient Grudge, which we won't see for the second game, but once he sees that Dan has Sword of War and Pieces and Feast and Famines, we might see it for the third game.
Yep.
Garruk Relentless.
Yep. Garruk could definitely come in here as a way to hold the ground against what he's got to assume is an aggressive deck. You don't play Digraph Ghoul in a slow controlling deck.
No, Fume Spitter, not the one drop you want in a control deck. So, I imagine we'll see maybe the Tree of Redemption come in too.
I was going to say, do you think that's going to come in? It definitely gives him a little bit more resiliency.
Right. And what's really nice about the zombie decks is that they have so much reach in the form of Mortar Pod and Messengers and Image on the Messenger, but if you have a tree, a lot of times that can block that, the Messenger, which you don't necessarily want to kill in combat, and you can switch the life total.
Yep.
I think we'll see it.
Now, what do we think is going to come out? Let's say that we are bringing in here the Swords of Feast and Famine and the Tree of Redemption. We'll leave it at that. If you're looking to bring in 3 cards, what do you think is going to be coming out?
I would probably take out the Hell Rider, just because I think that if you can survive till the late game in this red-green deck, you should win. Just the inevitability of Swords, Huntmasters, and Wolf Runs. I'd probably take out Red Sun Zenith, maybe.
Yeah, identifying whether or not you're the aggro deck in this. Who's the beatdown?
Yeah, exactly.
The essential question. And I think that, I don't know if he's going to be able to tell it from game 1, but he should probably be the control deck.
Yeah, I think so too. Even though he has Strangleroot Geist, the fact that he has so many trumps in the matchup in the form of effectively 8 Huntmaster of the Fells with his Green Suns, I think he's the control here. The only thing that might throw him for a little loop are the Phyrexian Obliterators from Daniel, just because that card's so tough for a red-green deck to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very tough place to be.
Again, Tree Redemption against that can be really good too.
Yep.
Well, we'll see.
But the question is whether or not he's going to bring it in based on what he saw in game 1.
Right.
So for Daniel, if he's looking to bring in 2 Sword of Feast and Famine and the 2 Black Sun Zenith, what are the 4 that probably are going to drop out?
Let's see here.
Do you think he wants to keep in those Fume Spitters for those early birds and
I don't know.
elves? Is he comfortable going 1-for-1 on those?
I'm sort of actually changing my mind about the Black Sun Zeniths, because looking at the 2 deck lists, including the sideboard, he definitely has to be the beatdown, so I don't even know if he can afford to bring him in. He might just want to go aggressive. Set in sort of Feast and Famine, Bloodline Keeper, maybe even Metamorph. But Corrosive Gale is an interesting card too, because that can both kill the birds on turn 1 and be almost like a hurricane effect later in the game. That might not be bad. I think Daniel has a lot of options. Basically just depends on how he wants to play the matchup. But we'll see how he wants to do it. He might take out the Lilianas, just because they seem pretty bad against the Strangleroot guys, the Hell Riders that he saw.
Yeah, and also if there is a birds or an elf hanging around, it's not going to hit what he wants it to hit.
Yeah, exactly. So I expect the Lilianas to come out. That card in general is just not really that well positioned right now, I don't think.
All right, so Dan leads off with Swamp into Digraph Ghoul, and we've seen a lot of those so far.
Yeah.
Copperline Gorge leads to a Llanowar Elf from Charles, and we're going to see whether or not Dan can get that aggressive start that he's definitely looking for.
Yep. Looks like Dan in his hand, he has a Captain and a Swamp. Those are the 2 we can see, but no turn 2 play. Charles drops his sword, like, is this good?
That seems a lot like a pretty good trump.
Yeah.
And Dan's got to be wondering, does he have a slip in hand?
Yeah, exactly. Even if Dan doesn't have the slip, he has to at least keep up 1 mana and bluff it. Just has to.
Yeah, okay. So 2 for a Mortar Pod.
And Dan should definitely kill that now. Oh, no, Dan.
I'm surprised to see him pass with allowing that elf to live.
Yeah, there's no way that Charles is going to go to equip
There's
it. Yeah, there's Huntmaster.
There's Huntmaster, and there's a wolf.
Yep, so Charles goes up to 18.
And that could have been avoided if he'd used that mortar pod aggressively.
Exactly. Now he's going to have to kill that elf anyway, and he's just going to feel a little foolish.
Now Dan's in a very tough space here. He has dropped his 4th land. He's got the captain, but he's looking around and he's trying to figure out how to deal with that Huntsmaster. Mortar pod hits the elf because it's gotta.
Yeah, a little late. Dan wanted Charles to waste 2 mana on the equip, but you know, there's no way that was happening unless Charles actually had no cards in hand.
Yep. Well, there's the tragic slip, which he did have, which allows him to deal with the Huntsmaster.
Yep. And now I have to imagine he'll come in for 2. Charles is not blocking. He has to keep a creature alive to put that sword onto.
All right, at this point, he's going to play his captain, get in.
Yeah, he realizes
and
that.
He's in rough shape. Swung in for 3 there, knocked him to 15, but I think he's in pretty tough shape after the equip.
Yeah, if Charles has any follow-up at all, he'll be in tough shape, but he's already used a lot of his cards, so he might not.
So there's another elf. Swing in. We're going to get to untap 3 more lands, and we get to see what he's got. Making Dan discard.
Can't quite see what he discards. It should only be relevant if it's a Gravecrawler. And yeah, it looks like Charles doesn't have anything else, just re-equips his sword.
Well, that does give him a blocker that's pro-black, so...
Yeah, it does.
And it also protects his Llanowar Elf from an equip and sacrifice by the mortar pod.
Yep, definitely the right play to re-equip. Let's see if Dan can take advantage of the fact that Charles doesn't really have any more pressure.
He may not need a whole lot more pressure than just hitting with the sword every turn.
No, probably not.
So we'll see what he has as follow-up, because definitely want to have something, but...
4 mana. Boom.
And there's Obliterator.
And that's big.
That's definitely interesting, because that's not something you really want to be blocking. There's Cassie Wolf Run, which is going to allow him to be even more aggressive here.
Yep.
And there's another sword hanging out in his hand.
Yeah, so another sword comes down, equips.
And this looks like straight up race here?
It looks like it. Yeah. He's going to come in for 7, dropping Dan to 9.
Yep.
And with the Wolf Run, he's threatening lethal next turn.
And he untapped everything, so let's see if he has any follow-up. And there's a bird.
And I have to imagine we'll see
let's see how aggressive he gets here. Just shifting 1. Now that is interesting, because I guess he'd still be threatening lethal.
Yeah, he can't afford to move that other sword to his bird, though. Although he disagrees.
So that bird is going to get angry. And we are at... That's actually a lethal bird right now.
Oh yeah, I guess we had the life totals wrong. He's not 9, he's at 7, which means that that bird is just completely lethal. Doesn't look like there's anything Dan Greenleaf can do about it either. Recounting that damage, 6, 9, that's 11 damage.
Dan's trying to figure out whether he's got anything through here. Wishing he had a Vapor Snag, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Nothing on the deck list that's going to help him out. Got to send in the Obliterator. It does its work, but all that's going to do is mean that Charles is at a slightly lower life total when he knocks him out.
He plays his 1 spell, Messenger, and unless Charles forgets that he has a Wolf Run, this match is over. But we've seen stranger things.
Wolf Run's going to pump for 2. Birds is only 4.
He has the Llanowar Elf.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
So I guess Dan, instead of playing Messenger, could have equipped the Mortar Pod to a Ghoul and shot the Llanowar Elf.
And forced Charles to draw a card.
Yeah.
He would have needed another land to get there. So let's see whether or not we've got this here.
And yeah, with his opponent having no cards in hand, unless we have the life totals wrong, he should be dead.
This is apparently a harder decision than we think.
So, attacks in, Wolf runs for only 2. I think the source of the confusion might be that Dan Greeleaf is at a little higher life total at this point. But either way, we'll double check on the life for you, get that updated.
Yep. And Garrick Relentless comes down.
Yep.
Should be down to 1.
Dan Greeleaf is either at 1 or 3. So either way, the sword is lethal.
Dan is at 3. All right, that explains that.
Yeah, this makes a lot more sense now. So Garrick Relentless comes into play.
Takes out the Digraph Captain.
Yep.
Okay. There was some confusion at the table. Got straightened out. Meant that the Birds was not swinging for lethal. Charles held back just a little bit.
And he'll have one more turn.
Yep.
Which might be all he needs with that Mortar Pod and Messenger.
Now this is interesting because
I think the discrepancy, they're trying to work out the life total right now. But I'm pretty sure that it's 3 life.
it looks like they're more concerned about Charles's because of the swing back.
I see what you're saying.
All right, so we have Charles at 8 and Dan at 3. That was where some confusion was coming in. Looks like both guys had a little more life than we thought they did, which is changing some of the decisions pretty drastically.
Right. Dan went from dead on board to, unless I'm doing my math wrong,
He's got one
has
more
the kill.
swing.
Because that Obliterator has trample. Yeah, unless I'm doing my math wrong, I think Charles is dead exactly. To attack, he takes at minimum 5 damage, and then equips the Mortar Pod to the Messenger, and shoots Charles. Because his best block is Llanowar Elf on Messenger. Yeah, and then it doesn't matter where the 2/2 blocks.
So there's the correct blocks. Going to take 5 and go down to 3.
Yep. And then, as long as Dan equips that Mortar Pod, he should have it. Yeah, there it is.
On Messenger.
So interesting
Messenger
to note
at
that that game, Charles didn't have to play it that way. At the end of the last game on that last turn, if he had just re-equipped the sword to a different creature before attacking, he would have had just enough to live, I think.
Well, also, pumping into Wolfrun ahead of time, he pumped for just the 2, untapped it all 5, and he could have played that slightly differently.
Right,
It was interesting. The other thing is, the turn before that, he did have a chance to leave those swords where they were with just the birds back
and
all
that
on
would
its
have been
own,
lethal. Yeah.
and the 2 other creatures, which Dan had no way to deal with, would have been lethal swinging even with just the lands.
Right. So yeah, that was definitely I think a few subtle misplays by Charles there in the last turns. I think he thought he had it locked up because of those swords.
I think it may also have been a situation where he had the wrong life in his head and was playing based off of that.
Yeah, that too.
And that's
That's pretty easy to do. So we'll see how the other player, or how the players re-sideboard now. Dan looks pretty happy after getting that win. I would be too.
Felt like feeling like he got away with one there.
Yeah, turn 2 Sword of Feast and Famine versus your virtually mono black deck. Pretty lucky to win that one.
Definitely a good lesson, though. Make sure you have your numbers right, because especially when you get down towards the end of a game, those turns or half turns are really, really big. And if you're making a decision based on I'm going to kill you, take that moment, ask the question as to how much life they have, because it may change your decision drastically.
Right. So, yeah, he had a few chances there, like you were saying, sort of rethinking the math. If he didn't move the second sword to the birds, if he just left the other sword on the 2/2, I think that would have done it too.
That would have put him in a dangerous place in terms of that swing back. He might have taken a lot of damage, but he was at 15 and had a lot of damage to take.
Right, exactly. The difference between a 2/3 bird and a 4/5 bird, I don't think it makes too much difference.
Even just the 0/1.
Yeah, or
all
just
it needed
the 0/1,
to do was
yeah.
chump something, save him a couple of points of damage.
Right. I definitely like moving one sword, but both I think cost him the game there.
I don't think there would have been quite enough mana to swing the second sword back.
I see what you're saying. Right, but he has pro black.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yep. All right, so a tap Rootbound Crag sends back over to Dan, who leads off the way that we've seen him lead off all 3 of these games, with a tap Digraph Pool.
Tapped full art.
Yep. Second Rootbound Crag, also tapped, but this time he gets a Llanowar Elf. Digraph Ghoul comes in for 2, and Charles is quickly down to 18. This time it's a Grave Crawler coming down to join Dan's team as he passes back over.
Yeah, so 4 power on the board on turn 2 for Dan. This is exactly what he wants to go. Yeah, exactly. This is perfect for him.
All right, we've got a Mountain
Hellrider.
And Hellrider hops in. So we were talking about possibly pulling that Hellrider out, but apparently Charles is pretty committed to his rogue card.
I guess so. I actually like Hellrider block more than I like Hellrider attack here too, because you're trading 4 damage for 4, but you don't have the initiative. I don't feel like.
Phantasmal Image looks like that's going to be Hellrider.
Uh-oh.
That seems really bad for Charles. So that Hellrider coming in and attacking. The most important piece is he gets to. He gave Dan a wide open window.
Yeah, that was pretty much 2 mana for 6 damage there. Thanks to his opponent's Hellrider.
That was a kick.
And that's another reason to side out Hellrider, one that I didn't even think of, but
he hadn't seen Image yet,
right.
So at least he didn't know that was a reason to side out Hellrider.
That's true.
But
that was brutal. So Charles quickly at 8. I know he cannot attack with that. And this looks like a Garrick.
Yep.
Have to imagine Garrick will fight that. Garrick won't flip though.
Garrick will just go it.
Yep. And Charles is fine with that. He wants Garrick on his front side this game.
Garrick's got it. So Garrick just shot there. I think Garrick should be.
The triggered ability on Phantasmal Image means that it dies. Yeah, and it's countered, I think. So now we have the Hellrider on defense this turn. Definitely where it should have been last turn. Oh, another Image. That's brutal.
That seems not good. That seems like game. He's got to block the Hellrider.
Yep, he will be able to block. He will fall to 2 life, but 2 life against a deck with Drolf's Messengers. Oh, 1 life?
Getting shot for 3.
Oh, 1 life.
Taking
You're right.
4.
So now
all
Dan
the way
Greeleaf.
down to 1. So is Stream of Life in this format? Because
I don't think so. Huntmaster Fells is about the closest you'll get. And he needs one because Dan Greeleaf can end the game with a Drolf's Messenger, a Diregraph Captain, a Guess Verdict, a Mortar Pod. There's so many cards.
All right, and that's an Inkmoth Nexus from Charles. Got to figure out what's going on here.
Is he attacking?
Now that's quite interesting.
That was an ambitious attack. But it looks like he's Red Sunning, which has the not often remembered ability of removing it from the game.
Yep. Goodbye, Gravecrawler.
So right now Charles is tenuously, and there it is.
Good night, everybody.
That's the match.
All right.
So that was a quick and bloody match. I think we probably saw about 15 combined turns in that match.
Yeah, pretty quick. Both of those decks are designed to punish their opponents, especially Charles's build of Wolf Run with the Hell Riders.
Right.
Makes it significantly more aggressive.
Yeah, I actually really like Hell Rider, but in this matchup, he would have been better served just trying to buy time to get to his swords and his Green Suns and his expensive spells.
Leaving it back to begin with would have been correct, but also really got punished when he saw the two phantasmal images.
That's a card to side out if you're going to play this matchup, I think, just based on that alone.
So, very interesting card in Hell Rider, but if you're playing it, be careful. There are some other cards in this format that can really punish you for it.
Yeah. So we have a question on Twitter from David Zeal. With 2 swords on the same creature, can't you respond to the first sword trigger to untap your lands and Wolf Run again? You can, but by that point the creature's already done the damage. And
it has to, unless you had a double strike situation where you were going to have another opportunity to deal damage, all you're doing is pumping the power for the rest of the turn, which isn't going to do much for you.
Exactly. One thing you could do, you could Wolf Run a Phyrexian image to kill it with that with the second trigger on the stack, but I don't think that was the case that game.
Certainly. There was, any sort of instant, you can go ahead and get double use out of your lands with the 2 triggers, but you have to use it before the step ends. So combat is going to wrap up pretty quick, and by that point, by the time you get to your main phase and can play creatures, play sorceries, you don't have access to that mana anymore.
So, from a judging perspective, how do you feel about the fact that mana doesn't continue through a phase or through a step instead of a phase, or vice versa?
The change was subtle, but it actually clears things up because there's a lot of times when you move through steps that you're clearly moving through steps, and anytime that you were adding mana to your pool and kind of floating it through it got more confusing. And so making it very short periods of time, especially with the change to no mana burn, really makes it so that it's just clear.
This makes Mistbind click all the better though.
Certainly does. The old floated in my upkeep into my draw.
Hope I draw Cloud Thresher.
Hope I draw something. No longer have that, but there's certainly some tricks that are lost with it, but I think that
the net positive is better, you think?
It's definitely a net positive having the addition of the clarity.
Right.
Whenever you can sit down and say, we're not going to have these problems anymore, that's usually a win.
Simplify the rules, make it so new players are a little more attuned to the game, acclimated to the game.
I lean very heavily on the side of competitive players. I myself am fairly competitive. I want to be able to do things within the rules that